I built the exact same site in Webflow and in Framer, and while they both look the exact same, the way I built them is completely different. This isn't a ranking or me saying that one is better than the other. It's literally just me showing how to build it in both tools. So here's the plan. I'm going to show you how I set up both of the builds. We're going to go through the CMS, the layout, and animations. And finally, I'm going to tell you what I would personally use for what project. All right, so to show you guys what we're going to be building from, this is going to be the inspiration. Now, this is something that I built for my course, link in the description if you guys want to learn a full freelance workflow. But anyways, this is going to be a simple H1 hero header with a small nav. This is a very simple layout, and I think it's a good standing point to see where we can go from both tools. We get started with the actual building. I want to show you guys what the reference is going to be. I picked a very simple layout. This is just a nav and then a hero header with everything centered in the middle. So about as simple as you can get. Everything is using auto layouts, and we've got some buttons here. So about as simple as you can get. This is a sample from my course. If you guys are interested, link in the description. But anyways, let's take a look at what we've got here. So the first one is going to be Webflow. The reason I picked Webflow as the first one is because it's the one that's a little bit more hands-on. So right when you get started, it asks you 3 different things. If you want to use an AI site builder, a template, or a blank site. So we're going to go with the blank site for now. We're just going to create this. And as it loads up, we'll notice that we have a lot going on. So the first thing is going to be, we've got these pages, the navigator with all the layers, the components, the libraries, all the stuff that we've got here, and then some potential plugins and all this extra stuff that I've got. So now we're not going to use anything. The rules are we have to go as native as possible because I think that's the most raw way of experiencing the tool. We're not going to use any sitemap builder, generator. We're not going to do any of that. So the first thing that we need to do if you're using Webflow is going to be a div or a section or anything like that. So we're just going to add in a section here, and then we can call this, because in Webflow we have classes, we can call this hero header _1 just for the kicks and giggles. Okay, now we can add in, let's see, layouts. We can go to the star library and we can pick this nav bar no shadow because I feel like it's fair. We've got the actual content from Webflow. So we can go ahead and use that, and then making sure that we're going to be in the right section still, we can go ahead and add in another div just for that. And then we can call this hero header content wrapper just for now. All right, then we can go ahead and go into layouts and we can add this one. Now, if we go back to our example, there's a couple things we need to change here, and I'm kind of going as loose and quick as possible. But let's see, we copy this, we go into the hero stack, change that color out, and we can even make it a variable. So we can call this green, I think it was 50. So green -50. All right. Copy this in. Okay, so we're getting pretty close already, but now we need a button secondary. So button, let's see if we have one. We don't, so we need to create one. And now we just need to align these colors. And so this is gonna be one of the bigger challenges inside of Webflow, is when you're building from reference that you need to actually align what you're building and making sure that all the, I mean, of course, as is any, right? You need to make sure that everything that you're building is going to be aligned with your example. Add in that. You can add in a radius of like 15 or something. Now, you could be using secondary classes as well instead of button secondary. So we generate this primary button, or we just call this button, and then call this button and add a secondary class. So now we have the same button, and all we need to do is change this, so you can see how we can kind of move a little bit quicker inside of Webflow when we understand the power of secondary classes. And we see that by changing this, it's going to change the other one. So that's great. We can wrap this in a div just for now. Okay, and then we can call this flex horizontal, something like that. And we can add in about a rem here. A rem is just the 16 pixels divided by 16. We can do the same thing here, add it inside of a div, and then we can go ahead and just give it a max width of large and maybe do like 40 rem, and we can just center that. All right, so deleting this image kind of completes what we've got here, except for couple slight things here, but let's go ahead and preview this. Cool. And now we can take a look at the different breakpoints. So it's cool because Webflow gives us these secondary menus right from the gate. But then when we go into tablet, we can see that because our div wasn't changed yet to be responsive, we need to actually go ahead and change that. All right. So, for a reason, it's giving us the tutorial now. All right, so then we have to go into wherever we want it to get started, and we can use the keys to go a little bit faster. But let's say we want it to change from mobile large. Okay, and we can just make that vertical, make it 100% of the width. All right, and something like that. And then actually, I just realized we forgot to change this. So in Webflow, to change the base font, we want to go ahead and just select that. And then we need to make sure that it's the right font. So Switzer, but in this case, I'm in Webflow, so I don't want to add it in just for this project, but let's see, we can go with Open Sans, it's close enough. And then make this 80 pixels. All right, change the height to be about 1.2 and then a dash. That's gonna make it equal to the height of what we're building. Make this normal, and we can probably reduce this size if we divide it by 16 rem, because we can actually make it a little bit easier there. Okay, and then we see that we have a class on the paragraph itself called margin bottom 24 pixels. The issue with this is that we're attaching a class to a text element, but if we want to change, if you're a beginner, for example, and you come in and you see this and you're like, okay, there's this paragraph here, I just need to change the font size. That doesn't work, because now anytime you want to use this class to actually add some margin to the bottom with 24 pixels, like for example, we could do here, margin bottom 24 pixels, we're just reusing that. We'll see that we're kind of messing up anything that's inside with this size change that we did. So the best thing to do in this case is to get rid of that, call it paragraph or paragraph hero header or whatever you want to do, and then go with 18 pixels or divided by 16 rem. And I'm going to do the same thing with the height. I don't understand why Webflow has pixels as the main. I think it'd be better if they made it a little bit easier to change the relative size to the different breakpoints. But anyways, as far as we are going to go for this, okay, let's actually change that. Heading 1, and we can see that because we changed it in the desktop, we need to change it in the mobile, and that's something that's also going to be happening in our other one. So let's see, 3, okay, 34, just 3. Then we go here, we can probably call that 2.5. And then we need to do the same thing with all of our text here. So we can go 1, okay, and then 1 as well. So that's fine. And then just finally make sure that our buttons here is actually 1 rem, or we can reduce that. 0.7 is fine for now. All right, and that's fine all the way. Okay, cool. So that's kind of as far as I want to go with that rebuild, just to show you guys the complexity of the classes and show you that it's a little bit more hands-on when you're actually building something, okay? Now, I don't want to give my opinion just yet. I want to build it in Framer first. So let's go ahead and do that. I have a blank page here. So in Framer, what you need to do is go ahead and just create new breakpoints. For some reason, it doesn't give you these out of the gate, and it confuses new users when they drop something in and then you have to change it and all that stuff. All right, first thing I'm going to do that I actually did not do in the other one, I only did it to the hero, but let's see. I'm going to make the green 50 the background, okay? And then we're gonna go in and insert the nav. That's the only thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna allow, because yeah, I don't really feel like doing the whole nav, but let's see. Then we can just get rid of this fill. Okay, so we get rid of that bottom line, and then we can just leave it there for now. So inside of Webflow, for example, this nav, if we were to make it a repeatable object, right? We go into the layer panel here, we click Shift A, and we call this nav bar. Okay, now this nav bar is a repeatable component that we can paste absolutely anywhere, as many times as we want, and it's kind of like a set item that we can just repeat over and over and over and over and over. In Framer, it works a little bit more similar to Figma, where we have individual components. So you can now move this around and you have just an infinite amount of the same item, okay? But to edit this, you need to double click inside of it, and then you can preview it by the different breakpoints. It's pretty well done, it's pretty elaborate, but it works in a different way, all right? So then inside of Framer now, to build the actual hero section, we do have the Figma to Framer plugin, but I'm not gonna use that because that's cheating. But let's see, okay? We go into insert, and We can add in a section. Okay, cool. So we pasted that in. Let's see if we can get rid of this fill. Done. This button. Now, the thing that I prefer about Webflow is that it has classes where we can reuse, for example, with buttons and all that stuff. So it makes it a lot easier. Now, the fill itself, we need to change to be that dark green. So we go into foundations, grab this green. Okay, paste that in. And we can see that we don't have any assets yet. So we can make this a new style. Call that green 500, I believe it was. Okay. No code just yet. Okay, but then we can actually go ahead and just connect it to that. And we can do the same thing here. We can get rid of the fill. And then for the color, use that green. For the border as well. Okay. And I'm just gonna get rid of this shadow here. Or going through the layers, grab that first button. I don't understand why it adds shadows to all the buttons. I think it's cool that they can like do it that simply, but either way. All right, then we're gonna do the same thing with enter 80, if I remember correctly. And we'll see that as we're changing something, just as it happened in Webflow, it's cascading down. But the cool thing with Framer, in my opinion, is that you can actually see what is happening here without having to go through all the different breakpoints individually. And then when you publish, you're kind of surprised that it happened the way it did. You can also quite easily just connect it to fit, and that'll do that. And so inside of the padding, you can change the padding directly in here, and it'll just try to fit it within the confines of that item. So then we're gonna just copy paste this, okay? And then instead of doing fit, we're just gonna do 80 pixels. And then instead of bold, we're just gonna go regular, okay? And then, yeah, I'd say we're pretty much there except for this here. And then we can see here that the H1, the previous one, is set to 100% still. So if we wanted to, we can reset those overrides, or we can just do something like 150%. But for now, I'm just gonna reset it and then change it to, I don't know, something like 60 pixels, not percent, and then just go reducing until I think it's right. I'm just gonna eyeball it for this vid. So about 40, I'm just gonna go down in 20s. Okay, I'd say that's more or less okay. And then the same thing here. Just go reducing until I think it's more or less right, okay? And then we can change the exact same thing there, making the width fill the container, and then the buttons themselves should fill as well. Cool. So we're not using the classes necessarily, so that's a bit of a bummer, but it's still relatively easy to change these things, okay? So same thing, top and bottom, padding. Let's see what we've got here. Top, we can go 20, bottom 20. And for some reason, it's stacked into the center, so we can just change that actually from the get-go. All right, now the reason I'm going a little bit faster is just so that we can see how this would look if I just went quickly. But anyways, all right, now we have something that's kind of comparable between Webflow and Framer. I'm just gonna preview both of these side by side, okay, in its own preview mode. All right, so this is kind of where I get within around 10 minutes of doing this kind of thing. Now, if you added way more time, we could get a lot closer, but just for the video and we still have a lot to talk about, I think it's better to just leave it where it is. But anyways, now that we have this, we've kind of understood how we can design and build something in both Webflow and in Framer. If we wanted to add animations inside of Webflow, we go into interactions, we can add an element trigger or a page trigger. So for example, when the page loads, we need to go ahead and create an animation that can, for example, appear. We can do opacity. So we can set it as an initial state, and then it's 0, and then in the end, I'm just doing an example here, but we can go ahead and just go ahead and do another opacity one and set it all the way to 100. So that kind of showcases how we can add effects and animations, and you can go so far, it's insane with these kind of animations. And then in Framer, if we wanted to do the exact same thing, we go into the therapeutic products one here. We go all the way up to effects, appear, on appear, fade in, and that is pretty much done. I mean, we can play around with it a little bit, mess around with it, but let's go ahead and just preview this for the sake. Maybe I took a little bit too long in that. But yeah, you guys get it. You can really play around with it. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. So it's kind of like too fast. But yeah, anyways, you can change the length of the stuff. You can make it as crazy as you need it to be. You can go above and beyond with Webflow, just as you can with Framer. There is no, this is better than the other. It's just simply saying what you can do in each. If you go into the Made in Webflow site, you can filter by the different animations and you can see all the different things that people have done. And I recommend looking up a guy called Joseph Barry and Joe Moore. They're just absolute machines when it comes to this stuff. But I mean, I've covered all these designs already on my channel, but you can just see how far you can get with Framer. Okay, I mean, people are going absolutely bananas with these animations, just as they would with Framer. And you can see how insane these sites are. And this is all done with the actual content itself. All right, so then that kind of covers animations, effects, that kind of thing. In my opinion, in Framer, from what I've seen, it's easier to get the basic things faster. But then in Webflow, if you want to go super advanced and create incredible storytelling animations and all that, the timeline, in my opinion, might be an easier way to visualize that than inside of Framer. Now with Framer, it works the same way with Figma, where you have individual components and you can kind of start them after one another. So that's really good. But with Webflow, I believe that it's easier to see and to visualize it if you have an insanely long page and it has a bunch of animations. And this is just one hero header, so it's a bad example. But when it comes to these smaller effects and animations, there's no need for the thing to be so difficult in Webflow. I mean, you can see in Framer how easy that was, and it's kind of built in. And I wish that Webflow had that already built in, because it just saves time and there's no need to go that hard. So that's animation out of the way. Then we go into the world of CMS. Now CMS gets a little bit complicated. Okay, so I'm just going to create this fake blog post here, generate sample items, and I'm just going to do the exact same inside of Framer. We're going to generate a blog, and it's already created it. So we can see that this is just kind of fake dummy content. So let's see, while both of these are being published, we can go back to our categories and we can see all that we've got here. All right. So within Webflow, I feel like it's more extensive right now with what you can achieve in the CMS world. I've built an entire no-code app using the Webflow CMS. It's very extensive. You can go super far and you can connect it to lots of different APIs to be able to publish something or remove something and connect something to Xano and Supabase and Airtable. With Framer, you can also do these things, but I feel like because it's a newer platform, it might take a little bit longer for the more advanced things to be caught up to where Webflow is right now. But with that being said, if you're creating a blog and all you need to do is publish content just like this, in my opinion, Webflow feels a little bit too hardcore to achieve what you can do with this very simple product. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's bad in any way. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. Now, the plugins inside of Framer are also insane because now we have the ability to connect to Notion and Google Sheets and all these different plugins. So, I mean, it's insane that we can do this now, but let's be real, plugins was just announced like 2 weeks ago. So it's still got a little ways to go to be able to catch up with Webflow, but it's getting there. I mean, this is something that is very close. And it's also pretty cool because when we create something in Framer, it gives you this fake page and these blogs to be able to actually see everything. So for most projects, if you're going to create a huge CMS collection for a client, like for example, if they have a newspaper or something like that, where they're just gonna have thousands and thousands and thousands of items, then go with something a little bit more robust, even hosting it somewhere else and then importing it, something like that. But both of these options have very extensive CMS collections. Okay, so now that we have both of these sites done, I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm gonna ask you guys to comment which one you think wins right now before I give my opinion. Now, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that there is no winner. The reason being because these help different people, in my opinion. Now, there's a reason why when you go into awards.com, there's about 10 times more sites by Webflow than by Framer, not only because it's an older site and all of that, it's kind of what that user is. It's more of a crazy animation-based person, while Framer, in my opinion, is more for designers, pure designers, especially because it looks so similar to Figma. It's kind of what their user wants to be. And I see a lot of people in the design world that are jumping from Figma to Framer and selling templates and doing all of that because it is easier to learn than Webflow. But I mean, with that being said, I've built an entire SaaS using Webflow. You can go so far, so advanced with Webflow. And just to prove it, I'm going to go into the extensions, go into Wappalizer, and right there you see I built this thing with Webflow. So I am no stranger to the complexity and how far you can go with Webflow. So in terms of speed, I'm going to give the points to Framer. For a smaller site, it's easier to go faster, like you saw with the effects, the actual building. But then when it comes to larger sites where you have a lot of components that might need to be reusable and you have a lot of people that are adding stuff, and it might be easier with Webflow. I personally love working with classes because that's how my brain thinks and that makes sense to me. But I was working with Webflow first, so that's something to think about. In my opinion, Framer gets that point. Then CMS heavy and client handoff goes to Webflow just because of how extensive it is. Framer is getting there, but we still have some way to go. If you have a solo site, 1 to 5 pages, it might make more sense to go with Framer. The reason being is because it might be easier to manage, it might be cheaper, and you necessarily don't need all the extra bells and whistles that Webflow might be able to produce for a larger, more extensive site. Then, for example, a scalable product like I have for TileBit, then I'd go with Webflow. Framer isn't there yet, and hopefully someday they will be, but I just did a no-code video app and I covered what Framer can do there. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let me know what tool you think wins. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.